Hello again everyone, and welcome to another tutorial in my How to Draw Iconic Faces series. But before we start, of course, if you could subscribe, that would be great. Thank you very much. And also remember to ring that little bell icon. Okay, well, the iconic face I'm going to draw today is that of Peter Sellers playing the inimitable character of Inspector Clouseau from the Pink Panther movies. And it was created by Sellers himself, the whole persona of Clouseau, you know, the kind of bumbling inspector who thought he was the world's best, but he had a sort of dignity about him, you know, it made all his antics seem all the more kind of funny and pathetic at the same time. Okay, well, let's start with the eyes, as usual. So there's the point for the first eye here. Now, he's looking at you, you know, there's this kind of slightly outraged expression, you know, how dare you, monsieur? And the eyes are wide open. So this line comes up very sharply like that, and then slopes down, almost at an angle like that, then curves back down again. So you got that almost, you know, almost rectangular shape, slightly skewed rectangle. And then a curve at the bottom of the eye, like that. Nice big curve. And because the eyes are wide open, you see the pupil with the white showing round about it, so you get that kind of shape there. A bit of reflected light there and there. And of course you have the line of the eye lid coming up just above here and joining just the top of the eye there, and then appearing at the side like that. Then there's a width of an eye between the eyes, so you get the other one starting about there, and that again comes up almost angular and then cuts across almost straight but sloping down this time, and then curving like that. And the bottom of the eye again, of course, wide open, nice curve coming up to meet the corner there, and again the pupil of the eye with plenty of white around it, with a bit of highlight there. And again, the eyelid goes up and goes across. You can see the top of it this time coming down the other side like that. Now the actual eyebrows just above the eyes here, and they go, this one is quite thick, straight across, curve around the side of the forehead here, like that kind of shape. Another one starts about here, and again it's curving down slightly and round the side of the forehead like that. And the nose starts from this corner here of the eyebrow, comes down, another one coming in about there. So you get a slight bump in the middle as it goes down. I'll go on to the bottom of the nose in a second. You've also got lines underneath the eyes, like that, just accentuating that line. And then above the eyebrows themselves, you have what looked like another set of eyebrows, because there's kind of deep furrows in the forehead because he's crinkling his forehead up the way. You know, that surprised look. So you've got these deep areas of shadow which almost look like eyebrows themselves. And just above that, we have the hat appearing, and have the curved brim of the hat coming up like that, just above those eyebrow shapes, coming across. It's not a very wide brimmed hat, coming down like that on either side, and it kind of slopes up like that to the hat band in the middle. There's a kind of more of a curve in that bit there, and the hat band secured through these little loops here comes up on a curve like that down to the other side of the hat band there, and then the top of the hat itself then follows that slope going up on both sides like that, with a slight indentation in the middle like that. Okay, and you get a slight dent there as well, a little bit there in that one. Okay, so let's move down now. Of course, very near this we have his hair coming in, just following that line. That's where his hair would come in there. You don't really see much of that because it's in shadow, but we'll draw it in anyway. The other one comes in just about here, another side of his head, with his hair coming in, just coming in, and this line of his forehead comes down and then out again to his cheekbone and comes down there. So his hair fills in this kind of area here, and you see his ear appearing just about in there. Okay, now the other ear appears, well, let's put the other side of the hat in first. That curves down like that, and this one matches the other side like that. Okay, now his other ear, because you're looking up slightly at him, these ears appear to be lower than normal, so the other ear would come in just beneath the actual line of the hat there, and his hair comes in over his ear there. Do you get that kind of shape there? Okay, now his nose. Again, it's a slightly long nose, and it comes down, and you get this kind of pointed, really pointed shape at the bottom, coming up like that. A bit of shadow in there, we'll put that in a second. And his nose, his nostrils rather, dilated on the other side there, coming in like that, and with deep grooves on the other side of his mouth there. Then of course the famous moustache, which comes down and a slope like that on the other side, and it's fairly thick in the middle, about that thickness there, and the slopes over his lip, and then kind of curves down the way like that, and up over his lip, and then more down on this side like that. And his mouth comes up again fairly low here, up to the centre, and curves slightly in the middle, and it curves down the way as well. And his lip, top lip, will be in shadow, but what makes his expression very much like Peter Sellers and Clouseau is his bottom lip, and what you get is this very narrow bit there, and it's almost as if he's pushing his bottom lip up, so you get this kind of indentation there, and more of a curve on either side there, and you get this kind of shape, shaded shape under his bottom lip in there. And once we start shading that, you see what I mean. And his chin, fairly squared across the bottom, shaded in there, but we'll do those shading later on. And then you carry on with his side of his face coming around to join again the fairly square chin, coming up like that, and drawing that, come down there like that. Okay, and of course what he's wearing is collar and tie, so you see the collar of his shirt disappearing in here, his neck and the back of his hair disappearing in there, and his shirt collar appearing just a bit in here, with his tie in here, which I put in a bit later. But of course another part of his dress that makes him very recognisable is his trench coat. So there's a big collar turned up here, so this big collar comes out away out like that, back in again, and the front of his coat comes in here over his tie there, and it's double kind of a lapel, so that comes, another one comes in there, down there, and you get the stitching, you know, double stitching coming in here like that on the way down. And the slope of his shoulder in here, you get the kind of epaulette of his trench coat appearing there with the button like that. And then of course you get the kind of part of the coat which is like a flap, you know, part of a, originally I suppose in the old fashioned days there was like a part of a cloak coming over, but that kind of loose part there, and the shadows of the wrinkles of the coat makes itself, and you get the shadow underneath here of the collar, and coming around there as well like that. The other side, much the same, you get the coat coming down here, and you get the collar. This time it's seen from the side, so you see it like that, with the deep shadow on there, and the second part of the collar coming up here like that. Okay, and his other epaulette is appearing there, with his shoulder there. So that's roughly the sketch of Inspector Clouseau's appearance. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start shading it in and also toughening up some of these lines. So I'll catch up with you when I've begun to start that. Okay. Okay, well, as you can see, I've started to shade in the hat. You can make it quite sketchy, you know, you can use these as parallel lines, or you can use kind of circular motion. That's the shading under the top of the hat brim there. And the deep shading in here, almost like a triangular shape coming in here. So again, if you use a circular motion and put a bit of weight on your pencil, you'll get quite deep shadow come in here, like that, going up round into the side of his head there. And you have these kind of deep indentations in his forehead, like that. Remember I told you about these two shapes here? Well, again, shade them in, but not as dark as the actual eyebrows themselves, but they should be accentuated, because once you shade in the forehead, they should stand out a bit, like that. Okay, then you go on to the eyebrows themselves. Again, put a lot of weight on your pencil and make them really stand out, like that. Okay, and the actual pupils themselves, remember to leave these little highlights, but shade that in, like that, leave the other one there. Now you can go over, you get that staring look already, and then a bit of shading round the actual eye itself, and underneath the eye, remember that line I pointed out to you earlier? A bit of shading under there, a bit of shading under the eye too, and down this side. Alright, and just down the side of the nose here. Bring that shading down like that. Okay, and you do this one exactly the same way. Okay, and once you've got both eyes done, then you can move on to the side of the head for the hair. And as again, they put it in very sketchily, like that, because the shadow of his hat is going to be actually darker. So the shadow of his hat comes in here. Again, you use a circular motion with your pencil, if you like, and the ear down to that point there. I've given a double length of the broom, like that. Okay, bit of shading in the ears here, bring that down, and underneath, like that. Okay, and you can do exactly the same with this side. Okay, we can move down to the nose now, done both sides, and just underneath the tip of the nose you'll get a bit of shadow with a bit of reflected light just underneath at the very bottom there. Okay, so you shade that part in, but leave a little bit there, and a bit of shading underneath the nostrils there, like that. Okay, a bit of accentuation on the creases there, and then of course the actual nose, rather the moustache itself. Again, you can use a kind of circular motion with your pencil to shade that in quickly, and you leave little white bits and gives you a kind of a quality to the shading of the moustache. Okay, and the line itself of the mouth is quite heavily shaded, so you get this kind of shape, quite dark, coming up round with a slight cupid's bow there, and that downturn there with a bit of shading down the side of his mouth, and a bit more shading on the top lip there, like that. And then that little indentation, as I pointed out there, which gives you the feeling of the look of Clouseau down to his chin, that curve of his chin there, and then a bit of shading at the bottom of his chin coming in about here and round like that. Again, what you can do is you can just use your sketch lines, parallel lines, quickly like that, to give a sense of a bit of shadow on the side of his face there. That's coming up a bit more there, on the other side. And a bit more there, like that. And then we have the shadow, of course, under his chin, quite a deep shadow. His neck's turning around, say, line of his neck there. And the shadow coming up underneath his chin in here. And then, of course, the actual trench coat itself, a bit of shadow on this bit as it turns over. get a sense of shadow there. And, you know, the white shirt will be slightly shaded, so some lines like that. And on the tie, we have some stripes. So we have dark, kind of greyish, and then another dark one, and grey in there. And the stripes going the opposite way there. And a bit of shading underneath the collar there. And also down the side there. And as I said, these shapes here which I've drawn in, these are the shaded parts underneath the collar. So I'm just going to shade those in like I had over here. And let's see what it looks like when I've done that. Right, so I'm just finishing off this now. And, you know, trying to get a nice kind of sketchy quality to it by just shading over very roughly like that. Okay. Excellent. And that was Peter Sellers playing Inspector Clouseau in the Pink Panther movies. He made 6 movies, official movies anyway. And, you know, he was commonly regarded as one of the best comic actors in the world. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. And you can join me again for another tutorial very soon. But in the meantime, of course, all the best and happy drawing!